Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. On the hazardous weather graphic, well, no watches, warnings, or advisories here over the western interior or on up to the Arctic coast, but there are wind advisories out here for the eastern Alaska Range, west of the Toe Cutoff, and the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country. In the case of the Alaska Range, looking for 25 gusts 35 mile per hour winds, or I'm sorry, 25 to 35 mile an hour sustained winds with gusts above 60 miles an hour here. That's actually in effect from 8 p.m. this evening until, if I can read my handwriting over there, 10 p.m. Sunday evening, tomorrow evening. So out for about 26 hours. And again, that's for gusts 60 miles an hour. And over for the Tanana Valley, upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, 15 to 25 mile an hour sustained winds, no big deal with that, but gusts to 40 miles an hour. And that wind advisory, let's see, that's out from 10 p.m. tonight through, or I'm sorry, 4 a.m. Sunday through 4 a.m. Monday. And moving on to satellite imagery, lots of clouds, a lot of thick cirrus here coming in over the top of ridging that's got a pretty strong westerly flow cutting through the ridge axis. So it's enough to shut the moisture off, but not enough to dissipate all the clouds. And you start picking up some precipitation here as you head west, but nothing too terribly heavy out in this area, just pretty light amounts, although farther to the Kotzebue, for example, picked up about 0.2 of an inch of precipitation, as did St. Mary's there in the Yukon Delta, and Cape Newnham had ½ an inch, and those are the heaviest amounts reported here in the western areas, just 3 to 500ths there around the Nome area this afternoon. And then down along the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit heavier amounts there, actually not all that much heavier. Cold Bay, 2/3 of an inch of rain during the 12-hour period, ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And Unalaska had about ½ an inch of precipitation. And by contrast, only 0.08 of an inch falling at Kodiak State Airport and about 1/10 of an inch at Iliamna. There's some rain, getting light rain, starting to get in towards southern Cook Inlet here in the southern Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise, just cirrus thinning out here as it tops the ridge axis, crest of the ridge, and dives in across the southeast coast. We've seen some passing cirrus clouds there. Otherwise, a pretty nice day once again across the Panhandle, mostly sunny. Definitely dry and winds on the light side for the most part, and not too bad up here from the Brooks Range on out to the eastern Arctic coast. Temperatures in the mid-40s all along the coastline up there, and precipitation amounts pretty light and scattered, mostly with this band that's lifted off to the north, and just a few hundredths of an inch at most in a few areas. Out to the west, behind this system on the chart today, here's kind of a warm front through here, cold front, and then the occluded front extending to the north, and the precipitation field really dampening out as you get north there to the western Brooks Range. Some clearing here, just had moved into the Pribilof Islands this afternoon, or by late morning, or about noontime into the afternoon. Kind of a pretty good break here, about to move into the eastern Aleutians tonight, and then pick up some showers from Atkin-Adak, and especially along this trough axis, and then they scatter out again toward Shimya, and some scattered showers again along maybe the southern slopes of the Brooks Range here. Otherwise, pretty dry central and eastern interior, right on down into the Gulf of Alaska, and as I mentioned, the Panhandle, and tightening gradient here across south central Alaska, seeing winds gusting upwards of about 50 miles an hour at McHugh Creek through Turnagain Arm today. Otherwise, Port Hayden, gusts 46 miles per hour for the wind gusts, and Igigik, 40 miles an hour with, let's see, Cape Newenham, not too bad, only 23 miles an hour. The highest gradient down here along the central and eastern Alaska Peninsula, the Aleutian Range, and kind of breezy here along the western areas, but nothing of note, nothing out of the ordinary there. Pretty light winds, although about 10 to 20, maybe gusts 25 in some areas. And the clouds over the interior. And for tonight, the low center here will track northward right into the Yukon Delta. By midnight, the front will edge eastward. Gradient continues to tighten first this evening along the western Alaska Range. Channeled areas there will see some pretty good gusty winds, maybe up to 50 miles an hour, Sparavon in those areas. And it'll stay windy and increasing rainfall rates here across south central Alaska as that band pushes inland, even into the downslope areas of the Chugach, looking for some rain today, like areas from Anchor Point to Kenai on up to Anchorage and maybe Palmer. Western Susitna Valley looks better, and up across Kuskokwim Valley, wet tonight, changing to showers here over the southwest coast, Yukon, or the Kuskokwim Delta into Bristol Bay, and then showers ending over the Alaska Peninsula with possible clearing here for False Pass, Cold Bay on out to Unalaska, but a trough and moisture here back to the west, rotating westward. They'll probably roll in again the shower chances late tonight and into tomorrow here for the eastern Aleutians. Otherwise, offshore flow will keep it pretty nice on the eastern north slope. Temperatures mild, and that condition down into the eastern interior as well. And then the wind advisories kick in the wind advisory kicks in again this evening for the eastern Alaska Range west of the Toe Cutoff, and toward morning for the upper Tanana Valley. And for tomorrow, that front pushes eastward here, weakens, still has a fair amount of rain, another weak wave here developing and tracking northward, and the moderate to heavy rain shifts into Prince William Sound to Cordova and eventually into Yakutat with a chance of rain onto the north coast of the Panhandle in the afternoon. Otherwise, not a bad day. Along the Panhandle, should be another partly to mostly kind of day with increasing clouds in the afternoon and a pretty good chance of rain here along and south of the Brooks Range, and rain, pretty widespread, light rain for the Arctic coast, north slope areas, western Brooks Range on down to the Seward Peninsula. Some lingering showers, mostly cloudy skies. Yukon Kuskokwim Delta up into the Lenato Hills there. But cloudy IFR conditions here, St. Lawrence Island, drizzle, light rain, winds not a factor at all, and that'll extend down to the Pribilofs, and some isolated showers now for the Alaska Peninsula. This trough weakening, kind of splitting here, another batch of moisture back toward Adak and Atka for a chance of light precipitation there. And then some weak ridging, make for a nice day for Shimei and Attu, as well as Kiska and eventually Amchitka Island ahead of system farther out to the west that on Monday will drive rain and at least an increase in the winds, possibly gale force into the far western Aleutians. Warm front rains approach Adak in the afternoon. That ridge progresses eastward here and dries it out for the Atka area, Pribilofs up to St. Lawrence Island for a partly sunny day there behind this trough that pulls inland with some rain and showers. And low there off the eastern Arctic coast, tracking eastward. Could be pretty breezy up there with a good shot of rain, especially on the west side. Dry eastern interior. This low brings more rain up to the North Gulf Coast. Another round here of probably moderate rain, maybe heavy at times or briefly heavy, but better chances of rain over the northern Panhandle, especially along the coast. And for lows tonight, 20s for the Brooks Range, lower 30s eastern Arctic coast, near 40 on the west side. Lower 50s there for northeast Bristol Bay. You get king salmon on up to Iliamna, Kodiak as well. 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 50s, lower to mid for the Tanana Valley, mid to upper here for the Bristol Bay area, and mid 50s for the southeast coast. Upper 40s, 45 to 55 south central Alaska. 40s again for the North Slope and Arctic coast, although upper 30s for the Brooks Range. And the lows following morning, pretty well above freezing here, most areas, even the Brooks Range edging up toward the frost point there, but Arctic Valley is still down to 29, and mostly in the 30s and 40s over the remainder of interior Alaska, mid 40s for the Panhandle and the Aleutians, highs 40s and 50s, most everywhere.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Sunday morning flying weather here. Lots of IFR, western interior from the Brooks Range right on down across northeast Bristol Bay, the Aleutian Range, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, southern Cook Inlet, marginal VFR becomes VFR, north of the Alaska Range, all the way up to the extreme eastern Brooks Range, North Slope, and much of the Arctic coast looking really good. Southeast coast, another VFR start to the day there, and the Aleutians, much of the Aleutian chain here in the VFR zone. And for the afternoon, a little more widespread marginal stuff now from Atka Island over to the Fox Islands. Otherwise, VFR basically back to the west. Bristol Bay becoming VFR, Kodiak improving. IFR banked up along the Alaska Range here, especially on the east and south side, and then extending northward and across the interior to the Brooks Range, north side of the mountains there, VFR, and out to the Arctic coast. Widespread IFR here, Gulf of Alaska to the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and starting to increase some marginal VFR, possibly getting in Elfin Cove. Late in the day, Yakutat becoming IFR for sure, and VFR holds over much of the southeast coast. And then for Monday morning, a little bit more marginal VFR, deteriorating conditions over the northern panhandle with IFR back westward across Prince William Sound to Passage Canal, marginal VFR south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, kind of marginal there for Kodiak. And IFR here looks like from, well, western Bristol Bay, Pribilof's marginal, but IFR here in across much of the western into the central interior. In fact, an area IFR all the way over into Canada there on the upslope areas of the Brooks Range with still some VFR holding over the extreme eastern Arctic coast. And then for the afternoon on Monday, the interior pretty much marginal VFR, with the exception of Cook Inlet to Kodiak Island, looks VFR, and otherwise some marginal or some IFR on the southern slopes of the central western Brooks Range, DeLong Mountains, and catching the central Arctic coast. And then this swath of IFR here with the moisture from Prince William Sound into the mountainous terrain of the central Copper River Basin, Wrangels, northern Panhandle IFR, southern southeast coast VFR, out west marginal VFR, and then another batch of IFR coming in with the next system farther out to the west. Passes Anaktuvik starting out pretty good for both Anaktuvik and Atigan, VFR becoming IFR into the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR mostly tomorrow, same forecast for rainy, mostly IFR throughout the day. Windy, call it marginal, IFR southern entrance and possibly VFR, probably VFR here going out the north entrance. And for Isabel, marginal VFR, Mentasta looks marginal. And for Tanita, occasionally marginal tomorrow or mostly marginal throughout the day, especially into the afternoon. And for Portage, IFR for sure, possible low IFR eastern entrance, and for Chilkoot and White, VFR for the next, or at least through tomorrow, probably Monday as well, possibly. And for the freezing levels here, about 12,000 feet, still warm air aloft, south to north flow here, but the upper ridge associated with the high freezing level is starting to shift eastward now. But for tomorrow morning, 10,000 feet right up into the Tanana Valley, and 6,000 feet up there to almost, well, close to Old Crow at the surface, Brooks Range and the eastern north slope to the Arctic coast, and then kind of falling back to 4,000 feet there for the Bering Sea and something of a gradient supporting some northerly winds there for the southeast coast. And for the icing, pretty good zone with that south to north flow in the front edging eastward here of considerable moderate above 10,000 feet here, sloping down to lighter icing above 7,000 feet up toward the Brooks Range, and then about 5,000 feet. This all light to isolated moderate here, and about 5,000 feet here back to the west in the cooler air aloft. And the jet stream, upper trough here surrounded with a ridge to the east, no ridge to the west, but the whole pattern shifting eastward. And actually by tomorrow afternoon, this northerly jet at 100 knots will be, by late afternoon, it will actually be east of the panhandle, and good southwest flow pushing all the moisture and warmer air in. 3,000 or 9,000 feet, 50-knot winds over south central Alaska, west lighter for the Aleutians. 3,000 feet, southerlies 30 to 35 knots with this system, otherwise 20 to 30 western interior. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop here, southern Alaska.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the Augmented Reality Sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version.
Sweet.
Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Brees, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney. And
this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this Sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
right.
It's a dynamic learning tool, and it responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you know, you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching tool for topography can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu. EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Not much change over with the sea ice conditions to what we saw yesterday or the day before, and no big changes expected here for the next 5 days or so, and a long ways away from seeing any ice forming along the Arctic coast, especially today with those temperatures in the mid-40s. For coastal water forecasts, kind of a switch in directions here, but they're light. Northwest 15 along the coast of Prince of Wales Island, otherwise southeast at 10 knots for the central and north coast. Seas running 4 to 6 feet. Light southerlies, 5 to 10 knot southerlies here for the central and northern inside waters. Southern inside waters, look for a northwest breeze at 10, seas 2 feet or less in all areas. Outlook for Monday, see an increase in the winds here, definitely along the coast. Gales, minimum gales, southeast 35 there on the north coast, and small craft advisories in the central coast. South 20 knots there, west of Prince of Wales Island, 6-foot seas. Light southeast winds for Clarence Strait, 20 knots out of the southeast for Stevens Passage, south 15 for Northern Link Canal. Moving on to the Prince William Sound forecast, gales expected tomorrow, east 35 knots, seas 7 feet, 40 knots southeast winds here for the Middleton Island zone with those seas up to 8 feet, and then small craft advisories just under gale force here at southeast 30 knots, western North Gulf Coast, Barrens southeast 35 and east at 40 for Kamishak Bay with 15-foot seas, and small craft advisory Southern Cook Inlet, north winds 25 knots, 6-foot seas, northeast at 20, north of the Forelands. And for Monday, north 15 to 20 knots for Cook Inlet, about sums it up. Strongest winds southern areas, and small craft advisories northwest 25 now, and 7-foot seas for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, north 20 for the western North Gulf Coast, and east 25 knot winds with that next system here with the gales just off to the east there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Much lighter winds coming up on Monday for Prince William Sound, north 15, seas 3 feet. Kodiak Island, southerlies 20 to 30 knots, seas 6 to 10 feet, and west 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, 6 to 9 foot seas. Bristol Bay, west 20 with 5-foot seas. And for Monday, Alaska Peninsula, northwest 20 to 25 knots, seas 7 to 8 feet, 15 knot winds out of the northwest for the Bristol Bay zone, and then for Sitkinak to Castle Cape and Shelikof Strait, northwesterlies at 20, small craft advisories for northwest winds at 25, and seas 7 feet for the east side of Kodiak Island. For the Fox Islands, west-southwest or southwest, gradually becoming west here, but only 20 knots, seas running 6 to 8 feet. West 20 knots, Adak and Atka. West 20 knots from, say, Adak to Shimia, and 7-foot seas. Outlook for Monday, bring that up to 25 knots here from Shimia all the way over to Amchitka Island. Central Aleutians, Adak and Atka, southwest 20, seas 6 to 7 feet. And Unmak Island, west-southwest, 20 knots. Unalaska Island, west 20 to 25 knots. Strongest wind south of Unalaska Island, seas 7 feet. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, westerlies at 20 knots. Seas 6 feet. Southwest 20 for the Pribilofs, and west-southwest here at 15 from the northern Bering Sea into the Yukon Delta coast, and 15-knot winds for St. Lawrence Island. Outlook for Monday, north 10, pretty light winds up here for both St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, 10-knot winds, and north of Nunivak Island, Yukon Delta coast, west of 15. St. Matthew Island, west 20 knots, turns northwest at 20 along the Kuskokwim Delta coast, and the Pribilofs west of 15 with 5-foot seas. Beaufort Sea coast on the east side and the central coast all have small craft advisories going there. East, 25 knots with 5-foot seas. Lighter winds on the west side at about 15. Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, southeast 10, and Cape Thompson to Wales, north at 15. Northwest 20-knot winds from Wales to Cape Thompson, and then 25-knot winds from there up the west side of the coast, probably to roughly Cape Lisburne, and then go southwest 20 on the central coast. Small craft advisories continue on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, but different direction. Southwest 25, seas running 5 feet. For tonight, rain, wind push into especially south central Alaska, but there is a wind advisory out for the eastern Alaska Range and the upper Tanana Valley and 40-mile country for 40 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts in those areas. Stays dry with light winds over the Panhandle, dry eastern interior, and for tomorrow that front pushes eastward with a heavier rain along the North Gulf Coast, and that spreads into the Panhandle Monday afternoon as it improves back here to the west, and then more showers over the northwest and west coasts.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.